latest status report on known supercriminals still at large?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Bonnie. Coming up, Batman on the closed-circuit TV screen. Come over here.
When Batman first appeared on the screen in 1966, he was more or less a live-action cartoon, staying true to the source material of the comics his show was adapting. As time went on, he gradually became more and more grounded in reality. Sure, he had some missteps,
7 million.
But for every step the director took the character back from becoming more grounded, he would take 2 steps forward the next time. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Which leads us to Matt Reeves' The Batman, which is the most real and grounded interpretation of the character we've seen yet. A movie that's so down to earth you can almost feel the air in Gotham. And as a result, you feel like you can believe the events in this movie could really happen. You believe this inherently goofy concept of a man dressed in a batsuit fighting crime at night is a real thing that could happen. When in reality, it absolutely could not. Same can be said about his Planet of the Apes movies, adapting an inherently goofy concept, apes growing more intelligent than humans, which was once seen as goofy, but now is seen as some of the most mature blockbusters we've gotten in the last few decades. Where even though they're movies about apes, you stop seeing them as that, and rather as fully formed characters.
I hope that the audience is going to be swept up in the very uncanny nature of feeling like they were truly in the world of apes.
And it's not just the Batman and his 2 Planet of the Apes movies that are this way, but rather it's his whole filmography. Except for maybe the one 90s rom-com he for some reason directed.
The whole idea of the movie is that you have the limited point of view that these characters have.
So we do things so that we're bound by the physics of what it would do if you were doing it for real. So
I just wanted it to be real.
Reeves has a unique ability to take larger-than-life concepts and events and make them feel like they really could happen. Whether it's a movie about aliens, vampires, talking apes, or a man in a batsuit, it somehow feels very real. I got an itch I needed to scratch. I had to figure out what it was about his films that make them feel so real. And after hours of studying his films, analyzing them, thinking I have it and making a first draft of this video only to miss the point, I think I finally got it. Reeves makes sure to restrict himself when necessary, never going above and beyond, which sounds stupid. You should usually go above and beyond in film, but most blockbusters nowadays, to quote Ian Malcolm, get so caught up in what they can do that they don't stop and think about whether or not they should. Some movies have no restraint in the writing, creating unrelatable characters.
I ordered my hot sauce an hour ago.
Whereas other movies get so caught up in the spectacle that everything and everyone in it feels so cold and detached. Think about it. Do you feel more attached to this character or this character? Reeves understands that creating a believable movie out of an absurd concept comes with the necessary restraint in both the combination of the writing and the technical side of things. Or, to put it more simply, it's not in what Reeves does, but rather in what he doesn't do. So, what is it that Matt Reeves doesn't do? Well, for one, he never allows his cinematography to give off a larger-than-life feel. Many sci-fi directors will place the camera in more or less whatever shot looks the coolest. Which, yeah, some of them do it very well, but these have a very objective view, and you're almost being told that this is the cool shot of this fake thing. The result is oftentimes you being drawn out of the movie because you're reminded that you're seeing this thing that clearly isn't real. Reeves, however, likes to do essentially the opposite, giving the camera a very personal and almost claustrophobic feel.
The one thing that's very empowering, I think, when you're doing CG stuff is the sense that you could do anything. And then the first thing I do is make sure that we don't do anything, because that means you could put the camera through a wall, it could be the bullet, you could do all of those things. And I'm not interested in those things, because to me, those are the things that make you aware that you are seeing something that's being created.
And there's no better example of this than in his film Cloverfield. For those of you who haven't seen this movie, take a look at this shot.
Hud, listen to me, I got a job for you.
I already got a job. I'm good at science.
I see that, but this is more important than the sign.
Now what's happening here?
The entire film is shot from the perspective of me shooting, which was interesting for me to find out as a comedian, an actor, because I've never done camera work, really. Which piece of equipment is the camera? Is this it? Okay, good.
What you're watching is a found footage film. The whole movie is shot like this, where the characters in the movie are pretty much the camera operators.
Well, this moment is just you filming him and Jason talking.
Because the whole movie is shot in this way, that means he couldn't have any shots in locations that the characters couldn't reach.
Kevin Stitt, our editor, refers to it. This is like looking through a soda straw, and that's what you see.
The moment you have a shot in an area that characters can't normally be in, like say a master shot, that immediately adds a larger-than-life scale to the whole thing, and loses a sense of intimacy. The unique camera use in this movie serves as more than just a gimmick, but rather as a way to help ground this otherwise absurd story about aliens invading New York by forcing the camera to see only what the characters see. But when he has free range over the camera, however, he still uses it in a similar manner to Cloverfield. He oftentimes likes to have POV shots. Again, only seeing what the characters see.
We're gonna do a crime scene, you're gonna walk in and it's gonna be like it's a serial killer scene, except you're wearing a cowl and a cape. Really weird. The fun of that was to put the camera in Batman's shoes.
When he has vehicles, he likes to make it look like he attached a GoPro to it, so that they act in a similar manner to what we're used to.
We didn't do that wingsuit scene, but I was looking at GoPro footage of people who were filming their own jumps and saying, okay, this is the visual language.
He rarely has large shots that show you a full location, and when he does, he still makes them feel intimate. He might do this by having the camera seem attached to a wall, or maybe by placing characters near the camera so we never feel detached from them. He also pulls much inspiration from Alfred Hitchcock. He loves to constantly have the camera look over the character's shoulders, making it look like we're seeing what they're seeing.
I'm into this very Hitchcockian point of view of putting the camera in the subjective point of view of the character so you can put the audience into that experience.
Reeves understands that the camera is more or less a tool to elevate your screenplay, not the star of the show, and he embraces that. He never tries to impress you with his incredible CGI or try to show the scale of his movies. Rather, he likes to keep it intimate and never let his cinematography pull you out of the movie.
They told me you were smart, but that's impressive.
Now, I'm not much of a writer, but it would be ignorant of me not to talk about his writing, considering that he writes most of his movies. I won't spoil any of his movies, but he never has one-note characters. Rather, they all have legitimate reasons behind even their most irredeemable actions. His movies technically have good guys and bad guys, but they don't really feel like it. They feel more like a series of people giving understandable reactions to what's going on based on their backgrounds.
You don't care about your family's legacy?
What I'm doing is my family's legacy.
This gives a deep sense of humanity to his movies, even if his main character's a monkey. Because isn't this what we do? Things happen in life and we react to them based on our backgrounds. He never has one-note action heroes or mustache-twirling villains. His protagonists are very broken and flawed people, and his antagonists have very understandable reasons behind their actions.
Like, I love point of view driven stories. I love movies that put you inside, like the Scorsese movies, they're very point of view driven, but to many different genres. I mean, obviously he did all the crime films, but he's done so many different films where he always puts you in the character's shoes so that you can feel what it feels like to be them, to be in that situation. That even though on the face of it, you'd think, well, I'm never gonna identify with that character, and then he does that. And that kind of thing is fascinating to me.
Lastly, I need to mention his use of CGI, because he clearly uses it. And bad CGI is one of the easiest ways to detach you from the movie and break the immersion. But how is it that his visuals look almost photorealistic? With his Planet of the Apes movies and The Batman, he had the luxury of a high budget to help make the effects look very polished. But for Cloverfield and Let Me In, he had a drastically smaller budget, which ended up surprisingly working towards his advantage. Since both of these movies are horror movies, it was important to keep a fear of the unknown. So he would have the CGI required scenes be placed in obscure or dimly lit locations, which would act as a way to help hide the imperfections with the effects. So they still look pretty good despite the budget. As a side note, Cloverfield had an advantage over Let Me In because the intentionally poor camera quality could cover up many CGI imperfections. But both Planet of the Apes movies and The Batman, while having drastically larger budgets, didn't have the luxury of being able to hide their CGI. So how is it that he not only worked around this, but also had CG apes that look near flawless? He's very sparing with his use of visual effects. He tries to make as much practical as he can. So he filmed most of his Planet of the Apes movies on real sets and locations. He also did this on The Batman. The majority of The Batman's budget went towards its practical effects. So for the most part, the only visuals you're looking at are the backgrounds. And for those, he used what's called the volume, which essentially acts as a digital background. But back to the Planet of the Apes movies.
Okay.
The real sets and locations not only help submerge the actors as well as us into the environment, but it also saves time for the visual effects artists so that they can put close to all their focus on making the apes look as good as they can. The only thing that's not real for most of these shots are the apes. Caesar! But even then, the apes aren't entirely digital.
The apes are not real. They're basically our guys in mocap suits, and they're wearing these little cameras that focus on their expressions.
He famously used what's called motion capture, but he also used what's called performance capture on top of that, which essentially what these two do when combined is track an actor's body and facial performances. So these are more or less just actors giving real performances.
You know, they wear these cameras and they're wearing dots all over their bodies, and once you just sort of get over the weirdness of that idea, you're actually dealing with, let's say, Andy Serkis or Toby Kebbell or any of our 8 performers exactly the way you would any other performer, and that's really what it is.
Yes, there's obviously hours of hard work to make them actually look like apes, but one thing that CGI has a very difficult time replicating is human emotions.
What do you think, Snowy?
So what you're really watching here is a real performance with essentially an ape coat of paint over it. Which is the final reason they look so good. They're apes, not humans. Since we're humans and we're around ourselves all the time, we have a certain highly developed expectation on what we should look like. That's why most digital human characters usually look so uncanny. There's just something not quite right with them. We notice any little imperfection on them, whereas these are just apes. Sure, we know generally what an ape should look like, but not anywhere near as close to what we expect humans to look like. So some of the minor imperfections on them go mostly unnoticed. It's this sort of minimalist approach he takes to his films that works almost too well. The final result, at least for me, is a strong immersion into his films. And after a while, you forget that what you're watching is really very absurd.